You're listening to the JD Rucker Show. Let's begin. Welcome back, my friends, after a long and probably much-deserved weekend, extended weekend for Labor Day, for celebration of work, of the American spirit, the thing that makes Americans perhaps most exceptional. It's not necessarily our innovations, though those are great. It's not just our form of government, though that, at least at one point, was great. It's our work ethic. You know, there are countries out there that make fun of us for work ethic, but then when it comes to doing what is necessary for us to survive and for us to thrive, I think that we have it. The biggest challenge I think we have is that we have become complacent. Most of us have had jobs our entire adult lives. Most of us have done what it was necessary to try to support ourselves, support our families. And I think that the direction the economy is going, the direction this nation is going, we are about to have a wake-up call as a nation. And the question is, do we have what it takes to step up, to work harder, to fight harder, to go against those who many of us thought, at least at some point in our lives, were on our side? I remember I used to think government was on our side. I know how naive that thought is today, but back in, when I was a teenager, had ambitions, I wanted to, let me put you want to hear about presumptuous or egotistical or whatever. I remember doing some hard legal work back in my teen years to determine, could I become president of the United States? Because technically speaking, I was born outside of the nation. But technically speaking, I would be considered a natural-born citizen because my father, an American citizen in the United States Air Force, serving abroad, met my mother, and that's how I came to be. So, I was talking to teachers at the time because we didn't have the internet back then. I'm old, so we didn't have the internet back then, so I couldn't just look it up and look up stuff. So I started talking to the smartest people I knew. Speaking of which, even back then, teachers. I remember, it's funny, in retrospect, I remember thinking to myself after seeing what was happening with my kids in schools. And keep in mind, they've only, out of all four, out of their time in public school combined, is probably about maybe 5 years. Okay. Some of them were in public school, charter, barely in public school, but mostly private school, homeschool, charter school, a combination thereof over the last 3 decades. But I remember thinking during the time, it's like, wow, my school was not very indoctrinating. But in retrospect now, I look back at some of my teachers. I look back at some of the things that we were being taught. And I realized that even then, the indoctrination was starting. Anyway, sorry for my little opening rant there. We have had the weekend was pretty loaded with information. For those who don't know, I do run thelibertydaily.com on the weekends. And of course, every night I do this 365 days a year, 366 on a leap year. And this for a weekend where there were no big events or anything crazy happening, it was actually a very loaded weekend. Lots of information started to come out, not just about the elections, not just about what's happening in Israel, not just about what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in China, but even things that are happening here as far as our own handling of the problems. I think everybody's very well aware of what's happening in Aurora, Colorado, with the illegal alien gang, Venezuelan gang that has taken over parts of the city, entire apartment complexes. It's happening again right now. Woke up this morning, actually saw the video last night, but this morning I was reading into how it's already happening again. The same Venezuelan gang, different cell, chapter, what do you call it? But in Chicago, doing basically the same thing. There's 32 armed assailants, armed illegal aliens that were putting bike. I don't know. It's crazy. It's a semi-breaking story, and unfortunately, other than this morning's report, I have not done much research on it. But we're going to be talking about that thoroughly this week. I know it's a short week, but this is the type of crisis that following Labor Day. This is the type of crisis, the type of event that it might not be national, but it is. Okay. Hopefully, Chicago will be the wake-up call, because I think a lot of people saw what was happening in Aurora and thought, oh my gosh, what a crazy isolated incident. Well, guess what? It's not isolated. Now it spreads to 2 cities. When is it going to be 4, 8, 16, 32? I mean, when is it going to just keep doubling and doubling until all of a sudden every city has their own Venezuelan gang section or group of apartments or whatever? What happens when they decide, you know what? It's harder than we thought to control these apartments. Maybe we should start going after hotels. Maybe we should start going after individual residences. Maybe it'll be easier for us to basically set up a perimeter by evicting 24 families from their homes. Just find a nice suburban area that's easily defensible. Maybe we can get it. How hard would it be, and how long would it take for us? Could we instantly take these families, get them out or kill them or whatever, and set up fencing, set up barriers, set up guard posts, and bring in all of our AR-15s, and we'll keep a few hostages for sex slaves or whatever. But these are the types of things that were unfathomable to even contemplate just 6 months ago. I mean, I wasn't thinking about. Well, I take that back. I actually was thinking about it. Now that I recall, I did have this conversation on one of my shows. It might have been a year ago, where I said, you know what, I need to look that up, because talk about not prophetic. I don't claim to be prophetic in any way, but talk about. I hadn't remembered that until I'm sitting there thinking that I would have been surprised. Except I do recall now. I did a show where I said, at some point, and I didn't expect it to be now by any means, but I was thinking, in 2028, they're going to be able, if we don't stop it now, they're going to be able to take over apartment complexes. Oop, missed that one by a few years. Here we are, and they're already doing it. Meanwhile, we have a vice president who's obviously running for president of the United States, who truly thinks that you're all idiots. She thinks that I'm an idiot. She thinks that we're all, every single one of us, she thinks that we're at least in the same realm as being as stupid as she is. And so she's involved in the type of pandering that this isn't just about stupidity. This is about just a direct insult. I mean, if Donald Trump did anything even remotely like what Kamala Harris did she did at one rally, but then proved that she did it at the other rally. If he even came close to doing anything like that, he would be lambasted. But now corporate media is pretending like it isn't happening. So it's up to you, my wonderful, wonderful viewers here at Worldview Tube, to get the word out and let people know, that anyone who doesn't know, preferably a Democrat, let them know just how idiotic and how much pandering and how racist Kamala Harris really is. Let's play the first clip of her. This is her in Detroit. I'm not sure if it was yesterday or the day before. It's either Monday or Sunday, but let's play the one from Detroit.
You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time. Because what we know.
You better? What the heck is that? I've never heard her speak like that. She's done different accents before, but this one, this whole semi like a sort of foghorn, leghorn, sort of like, but really what she was going for was a Detroit accent, because she's in front of a Detroit crowd. She's trying to pander to the urban population of America by talking like this. It's like, where did that come from? Now you might think to yourself, well, you know what? Maybe she just got into the moment. I know. Like, for example, my wife, when she goes, we're from Oklahoma, and she would go sometimes like visit family, and then I get on the phone with her, and she will bust. I mean, she's like very much like this, but then every now and then she'll goes and hangs out with her family in Oklahoma, and within like a couple of hours, I'm like, hey, how is it? Oh, everybody's great. It's like, whoa, where did that come from? Maybe it's that, right? Maybe it's that. But then 5 hours later, she's giving pretty much the exact same speech, this time in Philadelphia, and this time to an audience that is about 50-60% Caucasian. Let's play that one.
Thank unions for sick leave. Thank unions for paid family leave. Thank unions for your vacation time.
think unions, went from, hey, you better do this to now all of a sudden, thank unions for your, give me a break. I mean, it's like, what is she going to do? What would happen if she, she's talking to, I don't know, an Indian crowd. Okay. She has an Indian heritage, which she start sounding Indian. I don't know, but did you ever notice that it really is just the Democrats? Hillary Clinton, there's that famous clip of her back when she's talking, I don't darn way the way in the world. She's talking, I think it was either Arkansas or someplace. It was, you always see Democrats do that. What is the deal with that? I mean, but it goes to show, because that was what Kamala did. Between Detroit to Philadelphia, 5 hours apart, same speech. Okay, same words, different audience, totally different accent, not even the same realm. I mean, could have been two different people if you had your eyes closed. You would have thought, wow, there's that lady's from maybe not Detroit, but she sounded more like she was from like Birmingham or something, but whatever. That urban, sort of Southern, but sort of urban, but sort of, I don't know. It's just a weird attempted accent. Anyway, going from that to Philadelphia, and I mean, sounds like she sounds like she's an East Coaster. It just goes to show she doesn't respect you, she doesn't like you, and she doesn't want anything other than whatever you can do to deliver her into power. And when I say you, I'm not just talking about the black audience, the black voters. I'm not just talking about Democrats. It's all of us. She hates us all. She hates every single American. Talk about equity, which that's been her big thing throughout her, at least the last 5 or 6 years of her career. It's all about equity. Talk about equity. She hates all of us equally. The equity of outcome, right? The whole idea that she can, in a perfect socialist world, the way that she envisions it, we all have the same outcome. She is it. She will deliver on that promise. We will all be suffering the maximum amount if Kamala Harris is allowed to become president of the United States. There will not be some people will do well, some people won't, because that's a fact. It doesn't matter what policy you put out there. There's always going to be, when you have a nation of between 330 and 350 million people, depending upon which illegal alien statistic you use, when you have a nation that's this full, that has this many people in it, every policy, doesn't matter, every policy is going to have a large group of losers. Okay? Even good policies. There are going to be good policies that are necessary for the nation that will have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Americans that are worse off as a result of that policy. But as long as it's helping to raise up, tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of Americans, that's the trade-off. Unfortunately, with every policy that we've heard so far, every policy that we've heard that originated from Kamala Harris or her, obviously her handlers, every policy is designed to harm far more people than it helps. And you might say, well, nobody can be helped by her policies. Oh yeah, there are plenty of people that can be helped by her policies. You got the elites, the globalists, the deep state, the bureaucratic state, the police state. And you might say, well, no, she wouldn't be in favor of the police state. She was for defunding police. No. She was for defunding local law enforcement. A police state is not necessarily driven by local law enforcement. A police state can be driven in this, I would argue, is far more vigorously driven by a national police state, national law enforcement. Well, there was a scary thing that didn't come true, at least I didn't think it came true, back in the Barack Obama days, okay? Obamacare was scary, and the cultural Marxism was scary, and the foreign affairs were scary. But the thing that scared me the most, that at least at the time I thought wasn't going to come true, was his push for citizens to be involved in essentially a national law enforcement army. It wasn't very well covered because basically it was kind of a pipe dream, except is it a pipe dream anymore? Is it possible that during a Kamala Harris presidency we could see the rise of basically, you got the Gestapo and then you got the agents of the Gestapo, which is like 30% of the population, right? I mean, is that a future for us? Could that happen during Kamala Harris's tenure if she were to win? I would say yes and yes. There was a time when things were designed to move slowly. We have moved on to an area where we're no longer in that stage. We're no longer we have no expectation of things grinding unless they're supposed to grind. Things are no longer, things can happen rapidly. Okay. These emergency use authorizations, for example, when it comes to big pharma, these emergency this, emergency that, executive order this, the emergency decree that. It's very possible that we could see the rise of tyranny happening quickly, not over generations, not over decades, not even over years. We can see it happen in the course of months, and yes, even weeks, and in certain, God forbid, horrible situations, we could see it happen in a matter of days, where direct tyranny over the people of the United States of America can be implemented. And that will bring us essentially to civil war. I have an article that I have over at truthbasedmedia.com. That's an old site of mine that we've revived for the sake of, I just need more outlets, 10 of them just not enough. I needed more outlets. I'm kind of like Imelda Marcos with her shoes when it comes to websites. And so I revived this old one because we needed it. And there's more on that later. We're getting deeply, very, very deeply into the conservative newsletter game out of fear of everything that I've described. Okay, out of fear of censorship. It's funny, I just got a text literally as I'm on the phone talking to a free speech, website / email provider owned by a company that used to work. The CEO, the founder and CEO was in the Trump administration. Can't go into details until I get him. Well, number one, until I sign up with him and make sure that it's going to work. But number two, well, let me just slow down. Let me take it back a notch. We will have more on that when the time is appropriate. But if you go to truthbasedmedia.com, you have to scroll down. It's funny, I can't even find it. So maybe it's been, I posted last night. There's an article by, there's two articles in particular that I wanted to cover, and I'm not going to have time to cover them today. But one of them was about, basically, it is very possible that we'll have civil war. That was actually a Daily Signal article by Tyler O'Neill. That's right. The title of the article is "Terrifyingly Plausible: Why You're Wrong to Think Civil War Can't Happen Here." And let's be clear, I can go to the InfoWars and Natural News and Gateway Pundit and see articles like this come across, but see this come across on Daily Signal. Okay, they've broken away from Heritage, but that used to be basically the Heritage wing. This is like the think tank side of conservatism, right? This is like you picture just a bunch of nerds, conservative nerds sitting back and being like, oh, let's talk about the efficacy of sanctions against China. They're not the type that is going to be talking about civil war. Well, guess what? Even they're talking about civil war now, and that's very telling. But according to the article, demographer, historian, and author Neil Howe hasn't just coined the term millennial. He also predicted the future to an eerie degree, and he thinks America's in for very rough seas ahead. He says a civil war in the U.S. is far more plausible than most people think. And he dismisses the reasons Americans often discount that possibility. In 1997, he published a book, 1997, okay, 3 decades ago nearly, published a book with Bill Strauss, The Fourth Turning, an American Prophecy, What the Cycles of History Tell Us About America's Next Rendezvous with Destiny. In the book, he suggests the catalyst for a major crisis, and 4 of the 5 have already come to pass. One of the events was a crisis over the debt. Here we are, which would issue forth a new Tea Party movement. He calls it just completely random that we happened to use that phrase. Again, he's talking about national debt causing a Tea Party movement, and he's talking about this in 1997. For those who don't recall, it was 2010-ish, when 2009, 2010, 2011, that era, a little over a decade ago, when we were first getting started with the Tea Party, and I'm glad, I'm very blessed to have been part of it. If it hadn't been for the Tea Party, we wouldn't be talking today, because that was really my first foray into politics outside of the business world. Back to the article. The other one was a WMD, a weapon of mass destruction, attack on New York City. Whoa, what? So he says in 1997, he's talking about a weapon of mass destruction attack on New York City. The other one was the pandemic, and the fourth one was Russia invading a former Soviet republic. Wow. So 4 of the 5 predictions have come true. 4. And keep in mind, these weren't predictions. He wasn't saying that these are going to happen. He was saying that these are the types of things that needed to happen in order for civil war to launch again here in the United States. The final potential catalyst, a nullification crisis where one or more of the states would actually nullify federal regulations, which would lead to a new secession movement. Now, those of you, there's a quote unquote fringe. I don't think it shouldn't be classified as fringe, but a lot of times people will. So I'll go ahead and use the word, not because I agree with the use of the word, but because other people will. But there's a fringe side of conservatism. And really it goes beyond populism. It really goes into pure constitutionalism. But this quote unquote fringe side, which I'm a part of, to be clear, does believe in nullification. I do believe, sure, the Constitution, great, awesome. And as a result of this great and awesome Constitution, we have to acknowledge states' rights. Because if you can't acknowledge states' rights, you can't acknowledge individual rights. There's a logic here. Okay? I've always said, and I've said this for, I guess first time I really started thinking along these lines and getting a little bit intellectual with my conservative thought was right around 2016, might have been earlier, but it was right around 2016. And no, it wasn't because of the elections or Donald Trump. This was a totally separate renaissance that I was having in my conservative thinking. But basically the idea is we've got it backwards. In other words, the very top of government here in the United States, and it should be this way in the world, is the individual. And the individual should be, of course, beholden to God. If you take that as the premise, and that's not to say a theocracy, I'm saying an individual who reads their Bible, that person should be the highest form of government. And no, I'm not talking about dictatorship or whatever, a monarchy. I'm saying that person is responsible for that person and that person's family. Okay. And then the next level of government, lower on the totem pole or on the pyramid, would be local government, followed by, you guessed it, city, then county, then state, and then the federal government. The only role of the federal government in my ideal version of our constitutional republic, the only role of the federal government would be the catch-all safety net. Okay, if everything else fails, then you've got the federal government and then the military. The military is part of the federal government. That's something where, I've actually debated, well, should we go back to like state militias? And it's like, nah, that's stupid. But I mean, even like some people will say, well, but what about building like interstate roads and commerce? I'm like, no, that should still be up to the states. Okay. I mean, there should be one of the biggest challenges we have with our interstate system is that if you allow the federal government to have too much control, you have too much uniformity, there's no competition. In other words, like, You literally could have the states competing against each other for having the better versions of the roads, the better versions of the landscaping, this, that, or the other. As it is now, that's like not even a consideration at all. And it shouldn't be that way. We really should be utilizing each state as a union working for their own benefit, and this will raise the benefits for everybody else. In a similar way, for those who have never seen A Beautiful Mind, it's almost the same basic concept as the Nobel Prize winning theorem that John Nash used. It's currently used right now in gamification. It's currently used right now in negotiations. And I mean, this is something that some kid, some mathematician genius thought of decades ago, and it still applies today. The idea that if you can help, the best way to help the whole is to do what's best for yourself and the whole, right? So as a nation, we could do better if we allow the states to have far more control over what happens in the state, and therefore helping to raise the nation itself while also being better off for the individual. Now, I'm not saying that states don't ever get it wrong. I live in California. We get everything wrong, okay? I've never seen a policy in the state of California that didn't suck. Every single one of them, 100%. I'll keep backtracking. I actually saw one. I'm not kidding you. This was yesterday. And I remember thinking to myself, this might be the first policy that I actually agree with. And it was a regulation. It had to do with food. I'm scrambling my brain right now, trying to figure out what it was. It was some sort of, I'll have to research it and look at it and bring it to mind tomorrow, because, for years I've said, okay, well, we do nothing good here in California from a government perspective. And then yesterday, of course, right as I'm talking about it today, yesterday we actually had one where I was like, I need to look into that. I might actually, for the first time in my life, agree with something that's coming out of Sacramento. That might have happened. Crazy stuff. When you get a chance, check out truthbasedmedia.com. Find this article, terrifyingly plausible, why you're wrong. Yeah, me too. To think civil war can't happen here. And I want to be clear about something. I've said this before too. I don't think it's going to be civil war. I think if there is a war, a direct conflict between, Americans versus Americans, it's going to be more akin to a revolutionary war. Except instead of people sitting on the sidelines, and I'm talking about on their side, instead of people on the sidelines sitting back and doing essentially nothing, like as happened during the Revolutionary War, you had the people that were fighting, you had a handful of traitors, but then you had most of the people that were just like, we hope you all win, whichever one wins, we're good with, the neutral side. Don't forget, the Revolutionary War was very unpopular. There's only a handful of people. A handful, but it was only a small percentage of the population wanted to fight against the Brits. And I think that's going to be a similar situation here, is that we will have a small percentage of the population that is not only wanting to, but also has the means and the courage to fight against our own tyrannical government, our own future tyrannical government. We're not at that stage yet. I'm not saying, oh, guys, get ready. We're going to go storm the castle. That's not today, but it could happen at some point in the near future. And if it does happen, it's not going to be like a civil war. It's going to be more like the Revolutionary War. The difference there, obviously, technology and information, everything like that is different. But the big difference is that the other side, the side of tyranny, will have 20, 30, 40% of the population that bows down and aids them. We're not going to be fighting just against a tyrannical government. We're going to be fighting against our own neighbors. And you might say, that sure sounds like a civil war. It won't be, because we will have to rise up. And this is where we get into some dangerous talk. So I'm going to stop it right there. We'll talk more tomorrow about it. Lord willing, I will be back tomorrow with another episode. But in the meantime, y'all stay strong, stay safe, and God bless.